Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight for another creative aging program. Tonight, we're going to have the first in a series on how to do some watercolor painting. We didn't have a kit for this particular program, but I think that's okay. If you're interested in learning more about watercolor painting or the supplies that I used or anything else that you see in this video, just drop me a line in the comments, and I'd be more than happy to answer them. Pretty much everything that I have in this video I've purchased from our local craft and hobby store here in Pueblo. I don't necessarily recommend always shopping from our chain stores. If there's a local art store here in Pueblo that will suit your needs, please make sure that you go ahead and support our small businesses. I am not a Pueblo native, so I may not be aware of a store. And again, if you have one that you want me to check out, please go ahead and drop that in the comments as well. I think that's about it. This is only about a third of the finished painting, so there will be 2 other videos this month that continue the series on how to do flood watercolor painting. Please also let me know if the camera angle needs to be changed or anything like that. This is my first time doing a how-to video on painting, so I'm really hoping that it'll all work out. All right, that was a long introduction for a long video. It's about 20 minutes long. I hope you stay from beginning to end. And without anything else, I'm going to go ahead and get that video started. Okay, hold on just a sec, guys. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today for another creative aging video. I'm Sharon. I'm the Makerspace librarian here, and today we're going to be doing not a kit like we normally do, but we're going to be doing a demo. It's probably going to be a multi-part demo. We'll see how far we get in this lesson about how to make an easy watercolor painting. And I know that watercolors can be a very daunting type of paint. They are for me too. I want to make sure that everybody knows that I'm in no way an expert, but I am learning. So I was wondering if you guys would like to learn along with me. Like I said, there's no kit for this program, but I think that the supplies are relatively accessible to most folks, and we can come up with something really good from here. So I'm starting with this piece of paper, which is watercolor paper. I got it from the local arts and hobby store. It is just your normal everyday watercolor paper. As you get better, the paper becomes more important. This particular paper is just your basic, but you can get some that are matte or some that are brushed or some that have different rag contents or are more or less absorbent. We're not going to worry about that right now because this is just your basic first watercolor painting. And in order for this paper not to wrinkle up, which it will do a little bit no matter what we do about it, we're going to tape it down. And so I have some painter's tape, or you can use masking tape, and we're going to tape it to our surface so that it doesn't go anywhere. As we paint or wrinkle, it'll lie as flat as it possibly can lie. It won't lie completely flat no matter what you do. And then we can get started with the drawing. I'm just going to tape it down. And this part is where preparing your canvas is important, because we want to tape it really neatly, because that's going to give us the edge when we pull the tape off where there's no paint, and it'll look really clean and professional. So take the time when you're taping your canvas to make sure that you're taping your edges nice and straight. I have, obviously my board is delineated here. The surface that I always craft on is delineated in inch squares. So it's actually kind of nice because it means I have a ruler. But you may not have that. You may not craft on basically what ends up as a quote cutting board, but I find it to be a really good craft surface. You may just have to eyeball it, but that's okay. I bet you can eyeball it just fine. Just make sure that your lines are nice and straight and as close to the same size as possible. All right. Our
surface is taped. So now let's talk about our supplies. Today I have my watercolor brushes, my trusty watercolor brushes. These are watercolor brushes that I paid a decent amount of money for. So the bigger brush was $10 and the smaller brush was $7, I believe, dollars. You don't have to go crazy with your brushes, but I'm pretty determined to learn this craft, so I bought as good a supplies as I could afford on my limited budget. It's okay, regular brushes work just fine, but you might find that the tips shed and then you get like little hairs on your art, and we don't particularly like that. But if that's what you got to work with, use it. Creating art and the process of creation is how our brains learn and how they grow and how they stay elastic. So even if you don't have the world's best tools, go ahead and use them. Use regular paper if you want. Just make sure you tape it down and leave it till it dries. I have some scrapbook paper here. Big bang from that. That is pretty thick and it has kind of a texture to it. If you have some of that or just some cardstock, that'll work okay too for your first time out. And lastly, I have a pencil, just a regular old boring number 2, because I'm going to sketch my design. So let's get started on that. I don't want to, I'm going to move this just a little bit so that we're a bit more in the center. I don't want to do anything super crazy. I think I'm just going to do a mountain and a tree. And the tree is not even going to be correct as to nature. I'm going to do a Sharon tree, is what I call it. And it's just going to be like this. And it's a wavy line so that it looks like a tree. And I will zoom out here in a second and show you the bottom of my tree. Yeah, it needs a little trunk. So you can see there without my stand getting in the way. Oh, my stand got in the way anyway. Let's do this. You can see here, that's my tree. Doesn't look like much, does it? Looks like a funny little thing. But I promise if we add stuff to it, it'll start to look really good. So let's put you back on the stand. Here we go. And behind it, I'm going to add some visual interest. I'm going to add some mountains. That's it. That's all I need. All right. Now we're going to talk about paint. So again, I got this paint from the local hobby store, and it looks like this. As you can see, I've used it a bit. Millions of little tiny blocks. So this wasn't a terribly inexpensive, or a terribly expensive, palette. It was about, I think it was $40 originally, but I had a coupon, so it went down to $24, and that was completely reasonable. It's got these nice little paint mixing trays that are white, so as you put your washes on them, you can see what color it is. These little fellows pop in and out, so you can switch out your colors if you use a lot of one and don't use a lot of another. I will tell you that every single one of these was individually wrapped though, and I had to unwrap them all, and that took a bit. But that's the paint I'll be using. If you just even have the paint palette that you used when you were in grade school, it will work. It will work just fine. It's here. I'm going to put this right there is fine for now. As long as you have a place where you can mix. So I do recommend using the block colors, the cakes, as opposed to using the tubes. These ones, you don't waste as much paint as you're painting your picture, and that is a big deal. Paint waste is no fun. So we're going to go ahead and use, like I said, the block colors here. I'm going to move them out of the camera range just for a moment so that we can start to talk about getting our canvas wet. Okay, so I have up here my handy dandy mixer. You can mix in the palette on my particular watercolor palette, but I don't want to because I don't like it messy. So I have my own just cheapo palette. I'm gonna put that up there. And then I just have a can regular old boring water. And if you've ever taken an art class with me, you know that I love to use just regular old soup cans for my brushes. So that's up here. All right, so we're going to get started. And the technique that I'm going to teach you today is called just washing. This is a watercolor wash. And what we're going to do, and I'm going to again move this so that you can see the sky. I think we'll just do the sky in this part and we'll come back and do other part. Well, no, we'll do a little bit more than that. But what we're going to do is just get our brush wet, just plain old boring water, get it nice and soaked. See if you can see here, the brush is nice and wet. And we're going to wet the sky. Now, what I want you to be careful not to do is go over your pencil line. Go up to your pencil line, but don't go over it, okay? So we'll paint over the tape, that's fine, but don't paint over your pencil line. The thing with watercolors is they're only going to spread where it's wet. So if you control where you put your water, it's not going to go where you don't want it to go. So that's why I always like to draw out my pictures in pencil first. That way I know where I'm putting my water. And I'm not going to go over my line unless I make a whoopsies. Totally possible. I make lots of those. Like I said, I'm not a terribly amazing expert at this. I'm just learning, but I thought it was a cool technique and I wanted to share it with you guys. Particularly because I did want to, we've done a lot of crafts in 2020 and I wanted to start 2021 off with a bit of more of a finer skill as this is. Get your paper nice and wet and we will continue on. So there's our sky. And I'm thinking that I want it to be an evening sky. So I'm actually going to start here. Believe it or not, I'm going to try to show you this color here. I don't have a lot of space to work with, so let me start. This is a really deep purple, and I'm going to use that as my wash. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get my brush wet and just kind of rub it there until there's paint on my brush. Cool. And then I'm going to put the paint in my palette. So I'm going to keep doing that. So there's really, really watery pigment. Paint in my palette, paint in my palette. And that's probably enough right there. It takes a lot less than you might think. All right. So I'm going to dip my brush in and then just kind of roll it across the top of my paper. And you'll see that kind of immediately, I dropped a little bit, but it'll wipe right off. The paper, the water on the paper picks up the pigment from your brush and starts to spread it around without you having to do any work. So you just kind of dab it in there and the rest of it will go. So when you're doing sunset, I like to think that right after the purple usually comes the pink. And this particular palette I have has an amazing pink. So I'm going to rinse my brush out really good in my water. And then I'm going to take this pink right here. This is a nice neon pink. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to get it really, really wet. And I'm going to put it in the palette. All right, so now we've got our neon pink here. We're just going to go right there. And it's going to blend for us. We're not going to have to do any crazy work here. Just kind of use your brush to push it up into the purple. And that is literally it. It's so fun and it's so fancy. And it's like you didn't even have to do anything. All right, so I think the next color that we're going to have in our sky is going to be orange. So let's grab a good orange here, and I'm going to use actually this orange because the closer you're going to get to the horizon line, the lighter the colors are going to be. So I'm going to use this orange and do the exact same thing where I get it really, 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 really wet and then put it over in my palette. All right, so then now we're going to use that yellow that I just did. Actually, it's orange. It's very orange. And put it in there too. Shazam. And I love doing wash painting because it looks like magic. You hardly have to work at all. And all of a sudden you have a sunset that is just absolutely to die for, and you haven't done anything. That's my kind of painting right there. So last but not least, I'm going to use some of the really light yellow. Put it kind of down there towards the horizon line. So that's going to be this one right here that for some reason has a glop of green paint in it from when I used it the last time. I've been practicing doing this for you guys for a couple of weeks now, and I'm pretty excited to show you this, so I hope you enjoy it too. There we go. We got that yellow, and we're going to do the last little bit. So we're going to pull that yellow all the way down to that line for the hills there. Neat, huh? There we go. And if you want to make sure that it blends, you can take your brush through and tap it. Now you'll notice on my paper that I have basically a little puddle right here. It's no big deal. If you want to leave it and let it dry and let it just be a textural element of your painting, that's cool. Or you can take a piece of paper towel or tissue or whatever you'd like, and then just very carefully touch it. And it will suck up some of that color. You have a little dot once you do that, so just kind of move it over. And it'll help take away some of those things, like this amazing spot of purple that I had there. It'll come away in a minute. All right, so we're going to let that dry. And the most difficult part, I think, of watercolor painting is letting your painting dry. But while we're doing that, because you see how the water we put there right up to the line, it didn't go past it, we can actually start doing the wash over here. So and then that's as far as we'll go today. We're going, oh, see that? My brush still has yellow in it. Make sure you wash your brushes really well, or some of that pigment will end up in the water. All right, so here we go. That's much better. So we're gonna get it wet again, and I'm gonna just take it up to this line here. In fact, just to show you why I'm doing that, the hill would normally go like this. I'm going to take it up to that line. And then this is where you want to be super duper careful not to mix your colors, is right up here along this line, and then just go very carefully. If there's a white line, that's cool. We want that. But we don't want those pieces of water to touch, because then that pigment's going to flow into this part of wet paper, and you're not going to be real happy with the results there. So don't do that. Up to the line, but not over. And if there's a gap, that's cool. We want that. Okay, so that's wet. And for the hill color, we're going to want some greens. So my greens in my palette are here, and then there's a couple down at the bottom. But the green that I really like for background hills is this particular green right there. So we're going to just do the same thing. I'm going to make myself a little wash with this color, and then I'm going to put it in the palette, and we are going to paint with it. So here we go. All right, so we have our green in our palette there. And dripped some on the tree again. Look at me go. And we're just going to put it in. And because this green is actually pretty light, I actually want you to put it in the bottom. And we're going to work from the bottom up this time around. So put your pigment there in the bottom. Kind of bring it up to the tree, but not any further than that. And then what we're going to do is work in a gradient of greens. So see, I got the water down there, but that's okay. We'll pretend like I meant to do that. And so then the next green we should do is actually going to be a mix. So I have that green there, but I also have a gray down here, way down here. I'm going to use a gray. And I'm going to take some of that gray and I'm going to put it in the green. So get that gray nice and wet. And I have a bunch of gray paint on my brush now. I'm going to put it directly into the green here and mix it in so that that green changes color. See that? And then we'll do the next wash. It's going to give it a gradient look. And just like that, it's nice and magic. So if you're wondering why I'm choosing the colors I'm choosing, I'm basically just doing some simple color theory. And just being like, all right, well, I know that things closer to the horizon line are a color. Things further away from the horizon line, they get lighter as they come towards you. So what I'm going to do to make it even darker towards the back is add more gray to my green. And now it's a pretty gray green, right? That's fine. I'm going to put it right there, all the way up and around, and let it blend in. Ta-da! Now we've done one of the hills in the background. Just that simple. All right, well, now we're at a point where we need to let the water dry, or the water dry. Yes, well, I guess the water dry, but the paper dry too. So it's actually dry up here already. So we can go ahead and flood the background of this guy. And we're just going to put the water there. And we don't want to do too much. We're just going to use that gray color that we used for the back of that hill. Okay, so that one right there. And just put it in there. Because this is a lot of water in a little space, it's not going to be so happy. So you're going to want to dump a bunch of pigment in there. That'll dry to not be quite as dark. It's just got a lot of water in it. It's like a little puddle. And in fact, I'm going to chop up a little bit of that water to pull the pigment color down. There we go. That is more like what we want. Right there. All right, guys. So next week, we'll start working on flooding the tree. And we'll start working on flooding the other hill. And then by then, the canvas will be amazingly dry. It's not actually canvas, it's paper. And we'll be able to do some details. But if you look right here already, this is dry, so I can touch it. I'm not going to make it weird. And look at how pretty that is. Isn't that a gorgeous sky? It's just absolutely wonderful how quickly the paper dries and how beautifully it picks up the paint. So as we do the rest of our picture next week, it's going to just turn out absolutely beautifully. So thank you for joining me today on this more fine art demo. I'm sorry we don't have a kit for this particular program, but I really wanted to share this really cool technique that I've learned with you guys, all of you guys. And stay tuned. Again, next week we're gonna finish up our painting, and then the week after that we'll have our regularly scheduled kit. So until next week, stay safe, stay healthy, practice flood painting, just do colors. Man, it's super fun just to like get some paper, tape it down, and play with color. That way you'll really know what kind of color combinations you want to add to the rest of your picture. I promise you this will end up looking like a tree. And again, till next time, see ya. Have a great, great week. Bye.
Hi, everybody. I hope you enjoyed the class. Like I said, next week I will be back with you to show you how to get the painting finished. I think we'll be able to finish it all next week, which is good because in 2 weeks we'll have Shannon with Sizzlin' Stamplers doing her monthly stamping program. All right, guys, I've kept you long enough. Thanks for those of you who stayed tuned to watch this incredibly long, for me anyway, video on watercolors. I hope you learned a bit. I hope you try it. And as always, please comment and let me know if you have any questions or if there's anything you'd like me to explain better in the next video. I can do all that. All right, guys, have a wonderful evening. I hope you guys had an amazing holiday season, and I can't wait to see you next week. Until then, stay safe, stay healthy, and keep making, everyone. Have a great